welcome to June the 20th, 2023 Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee. So prior to the commencement of business of the Scrutiny Committee, I just want to read through the particulars for participants. So please can I remind all participants that this meeting will be recorded and copy archived for future viewing. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up if they can be seen on screen, or use the raise hand function if not. If a participant raises their hand via the function and is subsequently not invited to speak by the chair, please could they turn the camera on to indicate or place a message in the chat function. When invited to speak by the chair, please could all participants ensure that their microphones and cameras are on to ensure that they can be seen and heard when actively participating. If this is not possible for any reason, please bring this to the attention of the chair and/or the Democratic Services Officer as soon as possible. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and/or to grab the attention of the chair or Democratic Services Officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, they should let the chair or Democratic Officer know. So just like to welcome all committee members, cabinet members and officers, and anyone watching the live broadcast. So if you can move on to the agenda and whether we have any apologies for absence, please.
Councillor Inucci and Councillor Penn, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any apologies from anyone else? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, now move on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Are members happy with the minutes? Councillor Ernest.
Chairman. You remember you mentioned on page 4 of the minutes, the third paragraph down, you mentioned about the task and finish group last time.
Yes.
I wasn't aware that this matter had to be referred then on to another scrutiny committee. I'm not sure whether you mentioned that or not. It's several weeks ago. But is not that a decision that this committee can take?
Call Ian Perry.
Sorry, can everyone make sure they've got their microphone switched off if they're not participating? Let me check with Gareth on that, because it's Democratic Services. But yes, I think it does need to go to another committee first.
Yeah.
Is it surely not a decision of this scrutiny committee to set up its own subcommittees? Or task and finish, call them what you like, Chairman.
I think the agreed protocol we're following, Chair, is that it's because there are other suggestions from other committees, we're trying to look at which ones can be prioritised, Chair. So I think that's still with senior management, Chair. So we'll hopefully we'll have an update in a few weeks. But it hasn't been discounted yet. But we just need to make sure that we've got resources to make sure we cover the right activity at the moment. Yes. So we're just weighing up what the best one is, Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Ernest, I did attend the chair and vice chair's meeting and highlighted that we wish to do this task and finish group. So we're just waiting for, as Gareth said, we're waiting for that information to come back to us to see what the priority is. Is that okay?
Thanks for that update. That's absolutely fine. So I'm content with that. Thank you.
Thank you. So is everyone else happy with the minutes of the last meeting apart from that? Yes. Okay, if we can move on to the next bit. So on to any declarations of interest. Do we have anyone who has declarations of interest for this evening, please? I can't see any hands raised. So if we can then move on to the debate and the recommendations. So for agenda item 5, this is a reference from Cabinet, and this one's titled. Sorry, let me just have a look. I beg your pardon. I think I've jumped ahead. So the first one is a reference. This is from Cabinet, and it's Vale of Glamorgan Council Annual Performance Calendar 2023 to 24. And that's for us to have a look through. I believe Tom Bowring is going to talk us through this. Tom, if you're available to do that, that'd be lovely.
Great stuff. Can you see and hear me, Chair?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. That's with my internet's been a little bit patchy this afternoon. So good evening, Chair. Good evening, committee. Thank you for taking the reference from Cabinet. As the Chair said, this is the annual performance calendar. It's been referred to your scrutiny, Chair, along with all other scrutiny committees and the Governance and Audit Committee. And it does three things in terms of providing updates specifically to elected members in relation to Part 6 of the Local Government and Elections Act. Members will note that that part of the Act relates to the way that local authorities manage corporate performance and improvement related activities. So the report itself provides an update on the self-assessment process, on the panel peer assessment that's required, and also then a general overview of the annual performance calendar itself. So in terms of the self-assessment, that's a new duty that has been introduced by the Local Government and Elections Act. It requires public bodies to undertake a process of self-reflection on an annual basis. The purpose of that is to look at areas that require improvement, but also the way that value for money and in terms of economy, efficiency, effectiveness and equity is used in terms of delivering against our wellbeing objectives. So members will remember that the first self-assessment document was published in the late autumn of last year. It was considered by full council. And we've undertaken a process of reflection over the last 6 months or so, building on the feedback that elected members, but also in consultation with Welsh Government, the WLGA, and we also commissioned an internal audit review of our arrangements, which provide a substantial assurance opinion on the arrangements and mechanisms that we put in place. However, we did identify some areas that we wanted to strengthen in the coming year. So the report before you this evening talks about ensuring that we reflect the influence of risk within the environment that the council's directorates are working, that we make provision for some standard preparation for the directorate peer challenge sessions. So each of the 5 council's directors presents their self-assessment to a panel of their peers, plus the chief executive, relevant cabinet members and the relevant scrutiny chairs. So we're looking at doing some strengthening of that, as well as simplifying the report that is produced in the autumn as well. So in terms of where we're at, in terms of that process, it's now commenced. The 5 directorate self-assessments have been drafted and being finalised currently, and those challenge sessions are in the diary for early next month. Engagement will take place, Chair, over the summer with public, trade unions, business and other stakeholders, with an initial draft then being presented to elected members in September, and it'll make its way through the political process, including a couple of stops at the Governance and Audit Committee throughout the way before it gets to full council in November. The second element of the report talks about the panel performance assessments. Again, this is a new provision introduced by the Local Government and Elections Act and requires each local authority to commission an external panel to assess our performance on a once per electoral term. The decision in terms of the timing of that panel assessment is a political one, and the Act requires that a response by the council is published not within the last 6 months of a term of each of the authorities. Welsh Local Government Association have recently been consulting with local government on arrangements to manage that process on behalf of the council. We've recently provided some comments back to the WLGA. The Cabinet report, members will note, does, however, make a recommendation that that panel assessment be undertaken early in the calendar year of 2024. The purpose of that recommendation is that it would allow the Council to commission, receive and then respond to the panel assessment as part of developing the new 5-year corporate strategy, which would come into effect in April of 2025. And then finally, the third element of the report before you this evening, committee, provides the annual performance calendar. That's presented to you in Appendix A. We produced this for the first time last year following the local government elections. I thought it would be a useful summary for elected members to see how the whole corporate performance reporting framework fits together across the 12 months. So you can identify the main areas of activity in terms of corporate performance, from self-assessment through to the development of the annual delivery plan, service plans which translate those actions into individual areas and target setting, and then the quarterly performance reports that your committee are very familiar with now. We did introduce, as part of the calendar, some informal sessions for elected members to come together to share views, opinions, and suggestions around how we can improve the arrangements. I'm really grateful to elected members for participating really proactively in those sessions. They've really helped shape the reports that are considered on a regular basis by committees such as yourselves. So you'll see that Appendix A also makes provision for us to continue those in the coming year, with a session being scheduled now for July in terms of the self-assessment. A suggestion from another scrutiny committee was that we also put a mop-up session into September to enable any elected members who haven't been able to attend that July meeting to have a briefing on the self-assessment document itself. So that's a really quick overview, Chair, of the report. I hope that's helpful, but obviously delighted to take any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, that was very interesting walkthrough of what's been going on with our self-assessment and things like that. Has anyone got any questions for Tom Bowring at all? Councillor Lloyd-Selby, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, Tom. Thank you. As you know, I've had the opportunity to consider this report in a previous committee that I'm also a member of, and ask my questions on that. So I'm not going to ask you to repeat the answers that you helpfully gave me at that point. My question is merely, are we getting close to a date for the July workshop for members?
Thank you, Councillor. And we're getting tantalisingly close to having a date. I just need to double check some arrangements the colleagues have got late afternoon, but on a couple of those dates, but we will be in contact with elected members later on this week.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ernest, if you'd like to ask your question.
Oh, yes, thank you. Good evening, Tom. Yeah, I was just looking at the annual performance calendar, Appendix A, and I see you've got, for example, in the Against the July heading, which the former mayor spoke about just now, you've got member challenge via Scrutiny and Governance and Audit Committee. So presumably that's going to be a limited member challenge in respect of that, because it wouldn't, for example, include this committee. Or is that an additional one over and above this committee's challenge? Do I make myself clear, Tom? Or
yes, thank you, Councillor.
Sure.
I was
thank you.
Just navigating to the relevant page to make sure that I was with you. So, in terms of the member challenge by scrutiny committees that will happen in July, that'll be of the Q4 end of year performance. So it'll be one of your regular quarterly performance reports brought to your committee. So we'll make sure that you're able to close down last year ahead of your summer recess, prior to then starting again with Q1 after the recess. So in terms then of the end of year corporate risk register report that will be considered via the Governance and Audit Committee, it's a similar process whereby that committee will see the end of Q4 position in terms of corporate risk. So what I've tried to do over the last couple of years is bring back some of those dates. We've traditionally reported end of year performance and risk after the recess, but that feels quite late for elected members to be considering the prior year, and especially when you're then straight into looking at self-assessment. So we try and get all of those things tied down, so then when you're considering the self-assessment, in effect, that's an aggregation of all of it.
Okay, right. Thanks very much. Thank you, Tom, for that explanation. Thank you, Chairman.
I can't see anybody else has got their hand up to ask you a question. I suppose my question is the actual draft report that's around in September will come back to scrutiny committees for us to have a look at look at then.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah.
fantastic. So it will give us another opportunity to actually talk through and ask any questions of you then.
Absolutely.
Lovely. Okay, so if I haven't got any other questions that members want to ask, if we have a look at the recommendations for this, I'm assuming all members have managed to have a look through the recommendations on page 3 of this report. Are we content to accept those move those recommendations? Yes, I've got
Move the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Selby, and I expect I've got a seconder somewhere. Yes.
I'll second
Yes,
that.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. Okay, if we can now move on to agenda item 5. So agenda item 5 is, bear with me one moment, is becoming a Placemaking Wales charter signatory and developing placemaking plans. And I believe, Phil Chappell, you're going to lead on this for us.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, good evening all. The purpose of this report was to seek Cabinet's endorsement for the proposals that the Vale Council becomes the signatory to the Placemaking Wales Charter. And I think what I'm going to do is just run through what placemaking is, how we're going about it in the different towns. I suppose one important thing to note is that Welsh Government's advised us that any kind of future grant funding for towns is dependent on towns having a placemaking plan. And the idea is that every town in Wales should really have one, and they're a good thing to have, basically. So regardless of the funding, I think it's a good thing to have. Also, the report is seeking Cabinet's endorsement to apply for the funding and accept it to prepare the placemaking plans. So I'm just going to run through the presentation. Some of you will know this because some of you we've been working with on it. So placemaking involves working collaboratively across sectors and disciplines to comprehensively consider the future development of a distinctive and vibrant place. Apologies, my computer's frozen.
All right, okay.
Everybody see that?
Yes, we can all see it. We can all see the first slide.
It's not moving. Apologies, no. It's gone into meltdown. Bear with me.
Is it?
I might have to wing it.
Okay. Do you want me to read through it? Oh, you're not going to be able to move it on, are you?
No, don't worry. I think I might be able to just do it without the slides, really. So I'm just going to try one more time to share it and see what happens.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
Yes, we can all see it again now.
Yeah, you can see the first slide again. But not any right. Next, there we go. I'm going to do it manually. There we go. Sorry about that, everybody. So I'm going to frame this slightly differently, and then I'm going to say, what needs to be, the 3 elements really that need to be part of a good place. So if you neglect any of these 3 components, the quality of a place suffers. So activity is activities that occur in places, pedestrian movement, cycle movement, play, social life, what the public realm, how people use the public realm, and events in a community. Physical form, the physical setting of a place, the townscape, green infrastructure, the built form, landscape, ecology, public realm. And then meaning, that's kind of about the identity of a place, of a town, the sense of place, the cultural associations of a town. Some have very strong, some some we're sort of trying to tease out. You've seen some of the work already with the Barry Place board, where they've teased out the Barry story. Also in meaning, there's safety, inclusiveness, and also a sense of belonging, so that people feel that they're part of a community that they live in. So in signing up to the Placemaking Charter, we're agreeing across the board. So it's worth saying that this isn't just about Regeneration. This is across the board, the whole work of the council. that we agree to support placemaking in all of our areas of work and promote those 6 principles that you see on the screen there. So, as I said, in order to get any Welsh Government funding for the towns to date, we've been using kind of Transforming Towns funding. Worth saying that we're quite early adopters of this in Wales, and have worked quite early on with the Design Commission for Wales, because the placemaking charter has been designed and developed with the Welsh Government in partnership with the Design Commission for Wales. So our main contacts on it are the Design Commission for Wales. We've been bouncing off our work to date with them, making sure we're on the right track, because place plans are a very different thing. They're very about the physical setting of a town and sort of planning for real, and this isn't a place plan, so it does bring in the kind of the human element of it as well. So each town in the Vale will have a placemaking plan. We're all working with them in different ways slightly, because they're different towns, and different plans are at different stages. You know, Barry was one of the earlier ones to get started because some funding was made available for that, and just the early drafts of an area of Barry that we've been looking at, largely focusing around, you know, Halton Road, the town centre, and the waterfront, connecting the waterfront to the town centre. That's where we've been consulting with the Design Commission for Wales about what level of detail we should be putting in. Obviously talk to the town council, and on all of these our starting point is always going to be the town council. And in Cowbridge and Lantwit, again slightly differently. I think you know, working with Cowbridge Town Council, this is the most positive piece of work I've done with them since been working with them since I joined the council over 20 odd years ago. And you know, the kind of momentum I feel like we're getting from local members and councillors and the community and traders in these places that we're starting to see is really good. So Cowbridge is probably the furthest along since the charter was adopted by the government. And what we're doing is we're working with the town council and very much adopting a very kind of co-commissioning approach to everything. So sometimes it might be that town councils are putting staff in to help. In the case of Cowbridge, you've got very active councillors that are working with us on this. And you know, there was a recent event a few months ago where we did something at a town council event. I think it was about 500 responses. You know, so what we're doing is doing a piece of community in places like Lantwit and Cowbridge, where you have a feel for what the issues and opportunities might be. You know, you're asking people questions. It's not just about asking people what they want, it's asking people about what kind of community do they want to live in. You know, I want to be able to do things at night. I don't want to drive far to work. I want my kids to feel safe at night. I want them to have things to do. It's that sort of issues that and opportunities that we're teasing out. So with the help of Cowbridge Town Council, I'm just going to use Cowbridge as an example here from across the board, but they mapped all of the stakeholders and all of the assets in the town. And the idea is that this isn't just a Vale Council document, although it will be adopted by the Vale, is that it's a jointly owned document by all of the community organisations and businesses and the town council that we will work with on it. So you might have 2 people from the rugby club, 1 person, you know, somebody from the local church, somebody from the traders body, all working to do this community mapping between everybody. And you know, I think there's a mayor's coffee morning coming up, which is, you know, I think we're trying to use as many opportunities, whether it's online, in person, at schools, to try and to gather this information. And then from that then feeds into the placemaking plan, which hopefully would allow us to match priorities to opportunities, identify what to develop, and then start looking at kind of future projects. Because I think the one thing we've often lacked, because we've been reactive to funding so often and looked at pieces of land in turn, is that we've never really had the opportunity to kind of create a really nice integrated pipeline of projects across towns, and where you've got issues that we've been able to identify around green space in certain towns, or lack of commercial space, you know, high amounts of outward migration, nothing for kids to do. There's a few standout issues in the town so far that we're finding, and I suppose some of this community mapping stuff at the beginning will give us a chance to have some quick wins there, because it might be right. There's an issue with, you know, things for kids to do in Cowbridge, or there's an issue with this piece of land, or there's a potential here with this piece of green space that we could look at some quick wins. But the ultimately you'll have a placemaking plan that's co-commissioned and kind of signed off by all. And I think that's what we found through all the Creative Rural Communities work, all that period with that team that was in place in Cowbridge. And this is a kind of a new team focusing on the whole Vale, so it covers the whole Vale. Is that approach, that collaborative bottom-up approach to designing and developing kind of projects and solutions is really what works. It's not about parachuting in projects. And I'm conscious that I'm only talking about towns here, so we've been approached by other villages about this. They're saying, "Oh, can we have a placemaking plan?" And I think, being honest, the resources are only there to do them for the towns. But what I want to make sure is that those villages that use those towns, that go shopping in them, the residents that live there, their kids go into town, or businesses, to capture the views of the people in the surrounding villages as well. But what we can do is do what we've done in other villages, which is go in and support the community mapping process, which allows those. It's much easier on a village level to go in and map the priorities there, and then it acts as a really good magnet for funding, because you've got a really strong evidence base. And I think so far with the Cowbridge work, I've been really pleased with the kind of the story that's coming out of it and the evidence base that we've got. So I've just put some details there about I'll send the links around if that's okay, for you to insert. So I've got some videos on placemaking, the placemaking guide, and sort of the links to our pages. That's okay.
Thank you for that, Phil. That was a really interesting presentation, and what the future could hold for our towns, and working alongside other the town councils as well. Councillor Ernest, I can see that you've got your hand up. If you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, thank you, Phil. That's an excellent presentation, and it's very good to hear that this will be coming to Penarth, because I know under the Rural Regeneration Scheme we were not able to partake in that. But I'm conscious also that we've got some major villages around, including Dinas Powys, Sully and Landock, of course, which in the Penarth area gives us a population base of in the order of 40,000 people, which is pretty substantial. And I'm sure that you will when you get to Penarth. And the other question then is the timetable for this. But when you get to the Penarth area, you'll want to include the I call them villages or small towns around as well. And as I say, what your programme is now on the timetabling for this, as far as the Eastern Vale is concerned. Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, I mean, I think we will be capturing that probably digitally. I mean, I know that Arabella and Alec, who are in Nicola's team, have been out to or are going out to meet Penarth, to meet Dinas Powys Community Council around their priorities. I've been out to see them as well. I think timescales, it does depend on the community. It's one of those things that we found you can't really rush it. But like I'm saying, if we can see some really quick wins in there, you'll end up with a sort of a master plan for each town. So with Cowbridge, I think we're talking, Councillor Champion, correct me if I'm wrong, we're heading towards, I think, between September and December for finishing all of the community mapping, but potentially looking to start commissioning the placemaking plan in the new year, just so that we've got a really good evidence base. I think September, October rings a bell with completing that stage of it. So the whole process to get it done really well, as we're finding with, Barry, I think it's probably 18 months from start to finish.
Yes, I'm just thinking about the local members who are not, quite a lot of the Vale councillors, also members of the town council. But for example, I'm not. So I'm just wondering when we as county councillors, Vale council, are going to become involved.
Yeah, Penarth, they've met with Penarth, so I think it's about agreeing a process for that and who does what. So I think with Barry Town Council, for example, they've got a really good team of staff that are actually going to go out and do some community engagement, which is going to really help this process, because it's quite a big chunk to do for a town like that. But, I think let me pick that up with you separately, if that's okay, because I'll catch up with Arabella. So Arabella used to work for Penarth Town Council, and she's leading the work there.
Yep. All right. Thank you for that then. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. That's okay. Councillor Willam, if you'd like to ask your question.
Thank you. I think it might have already been answered. So just to confirm, we're looking at councillor involvement further down the line, and say about 18 months to formulate a proper plan for Barry, for example.
I mean, with Barry, we obviously, as part of the levelling up bid, we have had to create a plan that shows the linkages to the waterfront. What we're at the stage of now is kind of presenting back, and it'll be coming in a few months, presenting back to those that have been part of it, and presenting back people. This is what we think you've told us. This is what we think you want. We think you want this improvement on this road. We think you want better links to here. We think you don't feel safe there. We think So I think Barry's going to be a multiple sort of stage process, in that we're going to have to bid to make sure that we cover some of the eastern areas in Barry, High Street, Broad Street, the island, so that we're not just looking at it as a very town centre issue. Because I think that's one thing that we said to Welsh Government when we were in this early discussion, that they were traditionally looking at the boundaries of a town centre, and we were saying, actually, well, it's about how you enter a town centre, about the feel at all locations where you enter the town centre. And Barry's a town of several towns almost, and they've got different feels to each of them, with different identities and different stories. So I think we want to make sure that we don't miss any areas out of the core sort of shopping areas and visitor areas, so that it's all joined up about how you flow. Why do people go this way, or what's that bollard for, or So I think there's a I'm quite excited about the next stages of the Barry work as well.
Thank you.
Just to come in.
Chair. Sorry,
Chair, if it's okay, if I just come in on top of Phil there,
yeah,
is that okay? Stefan, just to add to that, we're further ahead in Barry than the other three towns, I think it's fair to say, because of the previous placemaking work and place planning work that was done around the creation of the place board, the sense of place work that then dates back to sort of 2016 and beyond. And a lot of that has been factored into the position we've got to now with Barry. So although there's still quite a bit of a distance to go, and we need to feedback on some of the work that's come out of it, some of the work that we are having to do around community engagement and community mapping in some of the other towns has sort of already been done in Barry over a period of time. That's not to say it's a much bigger town than all the other towns, and so therefore it's a more complicated animal to deal with, but we are slightly further ahead there. And I would hope probably that the Barry plan will be the first one that actually comes out ahead of the others. That's dependent on a lot of things, and dependent on the funding getting the funding from Welsh Government as well. But yeah, I think it's slightly further ahead than some of the others, I would say.
So thank you. Chair, through yourself, if I may, just finish something off.
Carry on.
Thank you. As you know, Phil, and Marcus, for many years I've been ranting on about the importance of linking different parts of the town to each other. So I've always been on the same page as yourselves there, especially the whole thing with High Street waterfront and the town centre. And I like the idea of Barry being community of communities. You're including the East End of this. It's essential that we link everything together. I'm just flying this for you now, for you to mark. I think one of the crucial things here is that we unfortunately, we really do need to take another look at the way people almost avoid Holton Road as they come in. I think we need to think again about the access to Holton Road there, because there's an entire line of shops that are just being ignored because people go round them. That's something just to flag up for now. Thank you.
No, it's been discussed.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Champion, if you'd like to ask your question next.
Thanks, Chair. And not so much a question as to let you know what's happening in Cambridge. The meeting that happens has a fluctuating attendance of people, but what we do now have are a number of champions. So I'm the champion for retail, and then we have a champion for sport and leisure, a champion for youth, a champion for, and trying to grab and trying to involve everyone within this. That's what we're trying to do in Cambridge.
Thank you, Councillor. That sounds really interesting. And from what Phil says, you know, sort of the Cowbridge councillors and the town have taken this on board wholeheartedly and wanting to run with it. So that's a positive move. Councillor Lloyd Selby, if you'd like to ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Phil and Marcus, for such a clear presentation. I read the report with interest. So I just want to check my understanding. In many ways, what we're saying is this is not new work that the council is going to be starting. This is work that's already been happening in one form or another in terms of community engagement. And the recommendation before us tonight in terms of signing up to the Placemaking Wales Charter will allow us to take a much more strategic, comprehensive approach to that work. Will expand opportunities to engage with the community, and clearly that's already happening, which is great to hear. So first of all, checking my understanding of where we are, and secondly, I just want to clarify the cost implications, because clearly there are cost implications. Signing the charter gives us the opportunity to bid for up to 50,000 per town, which sounds like very good news. We also had to provide 30% match funding. And is my understanding correct that that funding has already been identified within the council?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mix. So on your first question, I suppose we were offered some funding through Transforming Towns to do a Barry master plan. So this was before the placemaking charter was established. You know, so it started off as a master plan, and then the placemaking charter was adopted. Welsh Government rolled it out. We've got multiple events coming up with Welsh Government. So really, what it needed to do was sort of augment into a placemaking plan and make sure that it starts to hit those 6 principles, and that we know that it's structured in a way that's really the public can understand it, structured in a way that picks up those 3 areas of, you know, placemaking, so that we're following it kind of all the way through. Cash wise, I think it's going to depend on each town, because some towns might say, well, we'll co-commission and we'll go in with you on the match funding. There is a reserve for Barry. There is a reserve for the other town centres that we have for this purpose. So, we have enough money if needs be, and it may be then that the town councils that we're working with choose to channel the funding in a similar way, whether it's through a specific community engagement role, because the smaller ones don't have it. You know, Barry does have a really good team of people that we can work with. So, yes, I think the money's been identified. The match funding was a bit of a curveball later on that we didn't know about.
Thank you, Chair. I can lip read anyway. Your thing went off. just to add to what Phil had to say there. Yes, so a lot of the work, particularly around Barry, has gone on for some time, and unfortunately, by the nature of some of the regeneration programs that we've had, vibrant and viable places, Transforming Towns, Phil referred to. There was one prior to Vibrant and Vibrant Places. I've forgotten the name of that one. They were programs that tended to run for 3 years, and they did tend, as Phil indicated, tend to be a bit piecemeal. With one, you were picking projects out of a not a very strategic list to deliver something just to fit the funding schedules. The good news is how Welsh Government have taken a much more strategic approach now. They're looking at placemaking plans as a solution, so they're helping us fund those placemaking plans. But the solutions that will come out of that will be, as Phil alluded to earlier, a long, strategic list of things we need to do in the towns, which we can bid for then back to Welsh Government through this process of Transforming Towns. And I'm not guaranteeing we'll get the money we bid for all the time, but having the placemaking plans in place allows us to have a much more strategic method of doing that with a more planned approach, if you like, rather than just there's £150,000 available here. Oh, hang on, let's find a project that fits the bill for £150,000. So I think it's a really sensible approach. We've talked to Welsh Government for many years about the sort of funding cycles and how we can get over the problems around that. And I think this is a really good attempt at trying to resolve that.
Thank you, Marcus. I'm leaving myself on speaker now rather than keep switching myself off. I've got Councillor Ian Perry and then Cabinet Member Bronwyn Brooks who'd like to come in. So Ian Perry, if you'd like to go next.
Hiya, how you doing? Yeah, I was just checking when I first spoke to Phil about this, and it was actually 2013, and I obviously raised it back in March this year. So obviously, I think it's a great idea. I'm glad we finally signed this charter. We should be in the first, but you know we're ahead of many councils. You did say that it's going to be for the 4 towns, but if we can perhaps do some work with villagers, I know that my own community council has got a significant 5-figure budget for engagement and a placemaking plan. So perhaps if you could tentatively reach out to us and perhaps other town community councils, or sorry, community councils that you're perhaps thinking there's no money for, but if they've got money themselves, and then maybe engage with them and then bring those small councils on board as well.
Well, yes, I think what we're doing with those councils is going out and talking to them about community mapping toolkit and helping them in that way, and maybe helping them, because it's never, if we do the mapping, it doesn't work, it doesn't give the right answers. They want to talk to people in their community. So actually, yeah, it's getting people going and setting them off on their way. I think that's what we're hoping to do with Dinas Powys. But maybe handhold them through the process a bit. There's only 2 members of that team at the moment doing it though, so we're sort of spread a bit thin.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor Brooks, if you'd like to come in.
Oh, lovely, thank you, Chair. It's really just to sort of reiterate everything that Phil and Marcus have said there around bringing this report. It was really exciting to bring this report, and I think it's a unique opportunity for us, you know, to help plan and develop those towns into community towns, because they're all slightly different, but actually there is a golden thread, I think, that runs through them. So, and I think to take on board then that uniqueness that each town brings is vitally important to take this work forward. And Ian, I totally agree with your comment around the community councils, and obviously that community mapping then will feed into this, and it's absolutely vital for those communities. And I think if you look at the report as well, it's also interesting that it's not just local authorities and town councils signing up to this. It's organisations such as CADU, TFW, Play Wales, Pobble, the Master Builder of Housing, we've got the Welsh Planning authorities, and I think all of those, again, it presents opportunities of funding to actually develop a lot of this work, and actually gives us that really joined up approach then, once we've actually established then what every town needs, and those outlying areas that sort of feed into those towns. And I think it's a really exciting piece of work for us to undertake. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Cabinet Member. I can't see anybody else wanting to ask any questions, but I think we've had a good discussion around this, and I think it's, you know, everybody has been really enthusiastic about the prospect of sort of signing up to this, but also, you know, sort of shows with the councillors who represent sort of smaller areas that they want to try and get involved in community mapping and things like that, and I think that's a positive for the Vale of Glamorgan going forward. And what I also like is that this would also link in with and have the local development plan would be, you know, the revised one would sort of work with both of them to ensure that we get the sort of the place areas that we want within the Vale of Glamorgan. So, I mean, if everyone can see the recommendations, I'm hoping everybody's. Oh, Councillor Champion.
I'd like to move to accept them.
Okay,
I'll second that, Chairman.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Phil, and thank you very much, Marcus, and Cabinet Member as well. That's fantastic news for the Vale of Glamorgan. Okay, if we can move on to agenda item 6, and agenda item 6, and I believe we have Susanna who's going to present this for us, the Project Zero. Is that correct? Hi, Susanna. Welcome to E&R Committee.
I think we have Tom here as well, who's going to do an introduction, and then I'll take you through the reports.
Oh, lovely. Yes, Tom, please go ahead.
Thanks very much. Yes, bit of double act on this report.
Fantastic.
Committee. So this is the regular update on the Project Zero report for your committee. We're bringing this report to your committee and also to Corporate Performance and Resources Committee tomorrow evening, both ahead of Cabinet's consideration in order to afford Scrutiny Committee members the opportunity to debate and share your views back to Cabinet with references. So as Susanna said, just by way of a little bit of background, the Council declared a climate emergency in July 2019 and then later went on to declare a nature emergency in the same month of 2021. Project Zero is the response specifically to the climate emergency, but it does also reflect many of the commitments within the motion on the nature emergency. And what Project Zero has done is pull together a significant amount of work that is either underway or is required to be undertaken within a challenge plan document. And that challenge plan is set around three themes: around demonstrating strong leadership, around fulfilling responsibility to current and future generations, and then lastly, to make a difference now. There are 18 individual challenges within the plan itself and a series of 80 steps that are required to be undertaken in order to deliver the effort to reach net zero as an organisation by 2030, and also then to contribute to the Vale of Glamorgan and Wales being net zero for carbon by 2050. In July of last year, Chair, your committee made some suggestions regarding the format and presentation of the report, including the insertion of hyperlinks to some background documents to make it easier for members to access the information, further information around the barriers and risks associated with this particular area of work, and also requests for further financial information. So I also mentioned at our last meeting of the Scrutiny Committee when presenting this report that we had just recruited a programme manager for Project Zero, and I'm delighted that Susanna McWilliam is able to join us this evening, who is our programme manager. Susanna is going to walk us through an update on the other requests that have been made by the Corporate Performance and Resources Committee, give you as a committee an overview of the report and the appendix. Members will see that there's a very detailed update in Appendix A to the report. Susanna will also talk this evening a little bit around the Council's carbon reporting, the use of resources by the authority to support the programme, and finally the alignment with some of the other major areas of strategic activity within the authority. So with your permission, Chair, I'll hand over to Susanna to take us through the detail.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Tom. Yes, Susanna, if you'd like to go ahead. Yes.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thanks, Tom, for that introduction. As Tom's mentioned already, I just wanted to draw your attention to Appendix A because there's a lot of very rich detail in that appendix. It's the second time we've used that format to walk everyone through those 18 challenges, including the progress that's happened out until the end of March 23. So this time in this report is very much ring-fenced to those 6 months of progress. Then we see the future actions for Q1 and Q2, and also our risks and issues. So again, there's a lot of information in there, but I'll just talk through the top lines today. At point 2.3, I just wanted to draw your attention to the issues that were raised in the past at the Scrutiny committees. There were 4 top line questions around procurement, so that was clearly been quite a big topic of questions. The overall update there is that the procurement strategy has been approved and that it's recognised the need to make sure our procurement decisions are consistent with Project Zero commitments, taking account of the climate and nature emergencies. So that strategy has written within it some stronger commitments now around sustainability. There are other pieces of work to be done in Q1 and Q2 ahead, so we recognise this is an ongoing piece of work. As it says later on, we have quite a big we have a very large carbon footprint that is related to our procurement process. So it is something that we will be looking at in more detail as we scrutinise the footprint of our 22-23 carbon footprint, and that will help us to drill down into where those emissions are coming from. That relates back to these responses to your questions on procurement. We also have a forthcoming carbon management plan that is being commissioned and should be delivered in around September time. So that will help us as well to shine a spotlight on procurement practices and make some changes. integrating public transport systems as part of Project Zero. There's been quite a substantial update within underneath section 2.3. So I won't run through the whole thing, but just some top lines that take us back to 2010 to recognise there were significant cuts made to the Vale's rural bus services in 2010 due to austerity measures. And currently we're maintaining what the transport team believes is a strategic network that sits on top of the commercial network. So that's a blended model that means that we put some funding into some extra transport. So we support the local bus service, the 321 and also Green Links. There's been some work in Lantwit Major integrating the bus services with rail services. That's been an ongoing issue and there have been some tweaks to improve that, and hopefully there will be some improvements in times ahead. There is also ongoing work with the Welsh Government, regional groups and local bus services to keep a view to introducing more integrated public transport networks going forward, including fare arrangements. This is work in progress, and it's fair to say the Welsh Government have been subsidising bus services with their emergency bus scheme. That's due to end in March 2024. So we are unfortunately expecting some service cuts and some frequency reductions. And at the same time, we recognise that demand has dropped since COVID. So we have from the team there, they ask that in order to achieve a local net zero carbon future transport system, it is going to need significant sustainable resources that are required, in particular funding. There was a question that came through on greater use of photovoltaic panels on our council-owned buildings and other buildings. So the update on that is that there are PV panels in operation at 24 council locations. Those are listed in the report. In terms of the housing department, they've undertaken, they are undertaking surveys of 28 property archetypes. So in other words, that's 28 different types of housing. That will give a kind of benchmark, if you like, of where solar PV panels are appropriate. And there'll be a number of properties that will be considered suitable for solar PV. After that, they're going to take an optimised retrofit programme over the next 4 years of up to 500 council properties, and solar PV will be considered in that where it's suitable. But at the moment, all new build properties are required to achieve EPC 92, and that is with or without the use of solar PV. That standard is what everyone will be working towards. So moving on to section 2.4, this section pulls out some of the highlights from Appendix A from the 18 challenges that Tom mentioned previously. So it gives a flavour really, it gives a flavour, and then the future plans, risks and issues are more details in Appendix A. So breaking it down into 3 different sections that Tom mentions, the first is on demonstrating our strong leadership. Our first challenge is around engagement. So we're planning a climate summit focusing on engaging with the Youth Council. So that summit's going to focus on young people, and the theme is going to be around working together towards 2050 climate goals. That's planned for September or October time. We'll also be working with the Vale 50+ Strategy Forum, discussing issues around climate change. That's going to be in July time, and the forum themselves have requested that, so they're very interested and keen to continue that discussion on climate change and to have their say. When it comes to raising awareness, since our last report, we've launched an interactive Project Zero online hub. That includes a section, it includes 3 sections. It talks about what we're doing as a local authority, but it also includes web pages and some top tips. So things that people can do who live in the Vale, different ways that they can support themselves to be reducing their own carbon footprints, but also ways to help them to reduce spend as well. So we've tried to consider items that would take austerity into account. In terms of building our evidence base, there's a number of things going on, but we wanted to draw your attention to the renewable energy assessment with the Vale of Glamorgan that's been commissioned. That's to support the evidence base for the replacement LDP. So that study has focused on wind and solar PV opportunities for locations around around the local authority, and that's been shared. We're also continuing our work as part of the Cardiff Capital region to bring about an integrated approach to a growth hub and an EV charger rollout across the region. So moving on to our section on fulfilling the responsibility to current and future generations, we've lots of work happening around green and blue space. So we've submitted a bid to funding to instruct consultants to complete the new green infrastructure plan. There's lots of information on planting and biodiversity enhancements in Appendix A, and that would include the partnership work with the Vale Local Nature Partnership and the Great Glamorgan Way. There's some lovely examples in there of community groups and volunteers getting involved as well. In terms of green economic growth, we've been working with the Western Gateway and the CCR, as well as the South Wales Industrial Cluster, bringing forward plans for the Green Growth Hub at Barry. In terms of decarbonising transport, there's our EV taxi charging bays. They've already been installed in Barry and they've been extended. And also EV charging bays have now been installed in 18 council-controlled car parks throughout the Vale. In terms of planning and regeneration, we've just been hearing about the Barry placemaking plans and future plans in our earlier piece. And when it comes to sustainable food, we've actually just had the first Food Vale Trail that happened in June, and the ongoing work in school meals with the rollout of universal infant free school meals. In terms of waste, the big change since the last meeting was that the 10-year waste management strategy has been agreed by council. The new reuse facility has been built on the Atlantic Training Estate, and the source separated recycling collection, Penarth and surrounding areas has actually been rolled out already. That happened in April. When it comes to water, the council's installed automatic meter readers on 200 water meter sites across the council estate. And when it comes to energy, we're working to support the development of the local area energy plan. That's a large scale project that's bringing together a number of partners across the Vale. We've already talked about procurement and the launch of the new procurement policy and strategy. And when it moves on to housing stock, we've talked a little about the new council homes. So since the last meeting, there were 99 new council homes are in the process of being built. And the aim is that they'll reach the EPC-A energy performance rating. Lots of work happening in schools, but the top line is here that any of the schools' activities have been incorporated into a school investment strategy. So that forms a strategic centrepiece so that the learning that's already happening is being shared, looking ahead to schools and the progress that will be happening in the future. With fleet, the update there is that an electric recycling vehicle has been ordered. And when it comes to technology, we've commissioned some consultants who are going to provide digital consultancy for the public sector and work on developing the new digital strategy. And part of that will be to support home working in as efficient way as possible. So moving on to our section on programme management, we've done a review of the 18 challenges in response to the ask from scrutiny committees, and we've heard back from Project Zero board on the areas where they would like more feedback from the board itself. So we're rolling out a programme in our meetings, our Project Zero meetings going forward, to spend more time looking at those key areas such as green infrastructure, planning, regeneration and transport. To help aid progress monitoring, we've introduced a new reporting template, and that reporting template has given, I think, a voice to almost over 50 people who are working on Project Zero across the local council. So we have a new system in place. People who are working directly on different projects feed directly into that, and then the members of the Project Zero board also feed in. We've included in that the relevant corporate performance indicators. So we were asked previously to think about indicators and to pin down our indicators. So we've gone back to the corporate performance indicators, and those are included in Appendix B. And we've also included some information in that new reporting template on different funding routes that we're able to see more easily where the funding come from. We've been asked previously to report on our RAG rating, or red, amber, green processes, and how we are on that. So we've built that into that reporting template, and we'll be working on reporting on that within the next 6 months. Just touching briefly on carbon reporting, it is important for us as a benchmark and to drive change, but important to recognise that there are some areas of our work that don't have a carbon footprint that's attached to it. So we started reporting our carbon footprint in 2019 to 20, and since then the reporting has been refined. The methodology is delivered by the Welsh Government, and we work to that. We are aware, I think we have reported this before, that almost 90% of the organisation's emissions are calculated as Scope 3 emissions, and we recognise that procurement is a very large part of that. So for 22-23, the methodology has again been refined slightly, and our emissions are due to be reported to Welsh Government in September 2023, and we'll share that in the next report to members. We've also commissioned an in-depth study to review county-wide carbon emissions, and that will help us work towards the zero carbon reporting by 2050. So moving on briefly to section 2.7 on our resources. We have a table there with the Council's financial reserves that are available to support the Project Zero programme. And there are also a number of grants and funds and other budgets from within directorates that are used to undertake work. This funding and these budgets have been ring-fenced for Project Zero in line with the strategic importance of the work. Progress since we last met is that we've agreed a process for Project Zero reserves that actually just went live at the beginning of June, and we have put out the offer for people to come forward with different projects for us to discuss as a board and potentially fund. So there are two levels of where people can put in internal bids. These are internal staff can put through internal bids for reserves. The level 1 are for proposals of £5,000 or over, and level 2 bids are for smaller pots of money. So we really wanted to keep that open for a bit of innovation and for smaller projects where we can learn. There are some other updates there on the Welsh Government committing funding to 100% of all net zero carbon costs on schools-based projects. And maybe one of the challenges that's been highlighted is future funding for some of that schools work that does take additional funding, being potentially at risk if there's any withdrawal of Welsh Government funding. I think that will probably cover my update, as I wanted to leave some time for questions. But if there's anything in there that I haven't covered, do feel free to ask those questions.
Thank you very much, Susanna. That was a very thorough update. I appreciate that, you bringing that to this committee. Has anyone got any questions for Susanna? I can't see any hands up at the moment. Oh, Councillor William, did you have your hand up? Cool, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, firstly, thank you for that extremely lengthy presentation, which is a presentation of a very lengthy report. Thank you. I think it does need raising. That, I mean, the elephant in the room is that there are, enormous proposed developments which could have a massive impact on the environment and nature. I name Model Farm, I name the incinerator as two, and also any other greenfield sites that are potentially going to be built on. And I flag those up now because I also think of other sites as well, which, I've heard things that could be happening as maybe in the next LDP, but specifically the things I've just mentioned. I don't want to say there's a lack of thought about this, but I'd like to ask, what thought has there been about such developments, and what can we do about them?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question, Councillor Willem, and also thank you very much for the feedback on the lengthy report. Note to self, I will streamline it for next time. It's the first time I've reported to the committee, so it's really helpful to get a handle on how a brief their reporting should be. Yeah, thank you very much for your question. I think it's a really, really important one, and I'm not sure that I have an answer right now, but it is something that we do need to consider very carefully. I would say it's something that we need to bring to Project Zero board and add on to an agenda so that we're confident that we are asking the right questions when it comes to developing the LDP, and we're taking the right approach to that. Marcus, you are also on this call now, and I wonder if you'd like to come in and contribute to the question that Councillor Willem has asked.
Let me just have a look.
If you're still with us.
Sorry, I'm just having a look, see if... I don't know if Marcus is actually. It looks like he is, but yes, and yeah. I don't know whether I've got the cabinet member here. I know I've got Councillor Selby, who Lloyd Selby, who wanted to speak, but and then if you're going to speak to this, Councillor Wilson, are you going to speak to this at all?
I'm not going to speak on so much on the LDP, but I'm happy
Right,
to
okay.
speak about the recycling issue in particular.
Okay, all right. I'll no, if you're not going to speak on that, then I haven't got Marcus with us at the moment, but perhaps, I mean, what I should have perhaps. Oh, Tom.
Thank you, Chair. I wondered if, with Councillor Williams' permission, we could wait. I think Marcus is just getting himself between two locations, which is why his connection is not that great. And I know he'd like to come in and to answer your question. So if perhaps we could give him a couple
we can
of
return
minutes.
to that. Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes, that's great.
Thank you.
And
Sure.
I'm sure Councillor Willem will appreciate that as well. And perhaps what I should have said at the beginning of this is there could be questions here that might not be able to be thoroughly answered on the night. So we can always. Yes, I can hear you, Marcus. Oh,
apologies, I'm on my phone as my computer has died. So okay. I do apologise. And I can't put the camera on. But
no, that's okay.
I just wanted to address that issue around the LDP and the review of the local development plan and its relationship with Project Zero. I think it's really important that members understand that Project Zero is an overarching policy of the council working towards obviously the carbon neutrality for the council itself by 2030. The local development plan is not the same thing. The local development plan has a lot of different requirements on it, but it does.
Oh, Marcus, you're cutting in and out, I'm afraid, Marcus. The sound has gone, Marcus, I'm afraid. Perhaps you would be able to sort of give a more detailed response that you could send to Gareth, that he can disseminate to the actual scrutiny committee, if that's okay, Marcus.
Yeah, that's fine. Will do.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Marcus. You appreciate that. Okay. So if you're happy with that as well, Councillor Willem.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the point I'm raising is that I understand the differences between the LDP and this. It's just that obviously everything overlaps, and we can't declare a climate emergency whilst plonking a great big industrial estate off an airport and having an incinerator as well.
Thank you, Councillor Willem. So if I can go to Councillor Lloyd Selby, if you'd like to speak next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Susanna. And can I just say, I didn't find the report too long. I found it a very easy read and really helpful to understand what the ambitions are, where the progress is. So thank you for that. I'm going to ask a question about transport, if I may, which again may not be something that you're able to answer, and if you're not, that's absolutely fine. So in terms of the need to support and expand the use of bus services, I note that bus use is something like 70% to the level that it was pre-COVID. And I'm just wondering, do we understand why? It would be easy to assume, I mean, certainly I would assume that much of that is to do with changing work patterns, but I wonder whether any work has actually been done to understand why use of public transport levels has dropped, who's using public transport now, whether the need has actually changed, whether the timing in terms of what the public are looking for from bus routes has changed. Is that work being done anywhere so that we can ensure that rather than trying to replicate bus routes that have, you know, been well used historically, that the solutions are actually following the identified need?
Yeah, I think those are really important questions, and I will take that away and raise that with other colleagues and come back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Susanna. I appreciate it. I'll be interested to find out whether or not that work's happening anywhere.
Yeah, and I was just going to mention that Kyle is part of a Welsh Government group, particularly on the use of the emergency funding for buses. So he'll be able to take it back to that forum and ask.
Thank you, Susanna, and thank you, Councillor Selby. So I'm going to take Councillor Pamela Drake next, and then I've got two cabinet members who'd like to speak. So Councillor Drake, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, it was an excellent report. Very, very easy reading, I thought. I've raised this. I can see Councillor Willem laughing at me.
Well, I just like the idea of backing people up with the same comment. I never said it was too long. I said it was long.
Thank you, Councillor Willem.
It was worthwhile. Yeah. I've raised this issue before. On the page number 17, the Climate Change Challenge Plan 21 to 2030. Under number 11, work with partners to reduce the risk of flooding and manage our coastline. I've always said about coastal erosion. What are we doing to look at that? Because it is a serious issue, especially with our climate change.
Okay, thanks very much for that question. I think this is a bit of a returning refrain here, because Project Zero is such an enormous programme, and because it brings together work from right across the council. I think, again, I'll give the same response. I'll take that back to colleagues if that's okay, and we'll come back to you with an answer.
Yeah, that's
on
fine.
coastal erosion. Yeah,
Morgan does has a long coastal path.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And that'd be great if they can come back to the committee through Gareth, because I think we'd all be interested in the different questions that people have asked tonight. So that would be fantastic. Thank you, Susanna. I next have Councillor Wilson, cabinet member, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. And can I thank you, Suzanne? That was an excellent presentation. I think that was really thorough and quite succinct in lots of areas because you're covering so much. Just a couple of things, really. Obviously, what I'm really being very impressed is residents who have really gone to town on separating the recycling, and they've done really, really well. And I'm really pleased that so many people are really contributing towards trying to arrest climate change within the Vale Glamorgan. So I'm really pleased on that. But secondly, what I'm also very keen to do is trying to encourage people to, wherever possible, to think about what they purchase and to think about trying to use things which don't require so much packaging, because I do think that is the challenge. And I know that Welsh Government are very much keen on eliminating single-use plastics, as you and I know very well at another forum, Suzanne. But clearly, we got to work with Welsh Government on this, and I know there's initiatives going on at the moment, and there's consultations and there's legislation which will be starting from September. So I think it's very important that we also bring businesses as well as consumers on side on this and to help them as much as possible. So I wondered perhaps, and I've got a question, I think it's important that we all take that responsibility, but I also think that we also need to make sure that we as councillors are basically ambassadors on the Vale Glamorgan and try and talk to our businesses as well as our residents about this. So my question is, can we actually, formulate some sort of plan so that we can meet with businesses on a regular basis to discuss these challenges?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Wilson. I am meeting with Colin Smith and team in the next couple of weeks, so it's certainly something I'll bring up with him. We've already met and discussed circular economy and when and how we might move and think more deeply about circular economy within the local council. I think it's fair to say that their focus and priority has rightly been on getting these new things set up, and I'm really hoping that moving forward we'll be deepening that work. So I'll bring those thoughts back to him in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, and I know that I will have a conversation with Colin about that issue as well latterly. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Ernest, if you'd like to come in now, and then I'll ask
yes, thank
Councillor
you.
Brooks to come in.
It's a bit of a late point, Chairman. There is so much going on, as several members have commented on. What I'm a little concerned about is that local ward members are not always aware of what activities are either taking place or about to take place in their wards. I've had several examples of this recently, which I won't go into, but I do think it's very important that the local members, whoever they may be, are engaged in the process. Otherwise, I'm not sure that we can take it on board and fully support it. And I think there are quite a number of instances where work has been carried out. I think in particular, I'll name one in Penarth, the installation of EV charging points for taxis in Station Approach of Penarth. I knew absolutely nothing about it. It was in my ward. I heard nothing about it. And frankly, I've heard nothing about it since then at all as to whether it works or doesn't. And I don't see any taxis using it. So I think there's much greater need for member involvement. I appreciate the Cabinet are fully updated on this, but certainly we in the opposition are not as well acquainted with these things, and I would ask that that be done. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Yes, I think, I don't see any issue with that you're actually kept up to date with things that are happening in your ward that to do with the net zero. Right, I've got people waving at me now.
I was just going to come back to what Councillor Ernest's point about the EV charging station approach, just for a second.
Okay, I was going to say perhaps we would be informed of how well these units are used, but yes, Cabinet Member, if you've got an answer that you could give Councillor Ernest now, that'd be lovely.
That predates you, and it predates me as Cabinet Member, Councillor Ernest. That was introduced before you were a councillor in the ward. So I would suggest that you talk to your previous colleagues, because I'm sure they were consulted on. So thank you.
Okay, but I think you have raised a good point, Councillor Ernest, and I think, there isn't an issue with that. So I've got Councillor Bronwyn Brooks, but I also have Councillor Ian Perry. So I don't know if you want to wait, Councillor Brooks, until I have Councillor Perry speak first.
I'll wait up for after Councillor Perry, that's fine.
Yes, Councillor Perry, if you'd like to go ahead.
Got a little royalty now, people wait for me. Yeah, thank you. So yeah, as Anthony said, we could be kept informed. I did read through the document, and like Appendix A talks about engaging with the community. Now, what I've said in the past is there's no consistency and things are not joined up. So the big scheme is over here and the actions don't actually marry up with the big thinking, and we seem to be not progressing as we should or could be. And when we talk about engaging with the community, there was a big problem with engagement over St Nicholas Church in Wales Primary School, which went all the way to the planning committee before anybody listened. And the planning committee were forced to refuse planning permission for a school with clear failings in the very basic design. And the engagement hasn't been meaningful ever since, unfortunately. So you've got that. Then you talk about protecting, enhancing green spaces, and again, I'm going to talk about Bonvilleston, where we've lost one green space, another one's got planning permission on it, so we're losing all our green spaces. And yet here we are again talking about protecting and enhancing, and we're losing it. We haven't got any sensory gardens. We haven't got anywhere where people can go and sit and talk as a community. So here it all is. This is what we're going to do. But what we've got already, instead of enhancing it, we're building on it or doing something else because we have other priorities, which of course are good priorities. But we're going backwards in some respects. So I can see clear problems even within my own ward, and I know there are the same issues elsewhere in the Vale of Glamorgan, and we do need planning policies that actually are meaningful. I raised this. We talked about quality materials in the report last month, and there was no definition of what a quality material actually is, and the incorporate carbon within that material. I'm sad that active travel budgets are being cut, and I'm sad that we have footways that are obstructed. And I've got residents who have given up walking because of obstructions, because the hedges haven't been cut properly and there's no enforcement. So they are now making journeys by car that 2-3 years ago they were trying to make by foot. So we're going backwards there. Item 10 on reducing waste, there's no mention of the shared economy. And I do think now carefully of a decision by the planning committee to give planning permission for a former chapel in Dinas Palace, which could have been used as a library of things or a share shed. We need the infrastructure to have a share economy, and we are lacking that, and it's not being built in new developments. So every new development of, say, 20, 30 houses should have a place where you can store communal items, where it's a leaf blower, a lawn mower, those things you don't need very often. Instead of storing it in your own garage, instead of having all the packaging which comes when it's delivered, instead of having material stored unproductive, we have a shared facility within new developments, whether it's a private development or a local authority housing development. We talk about building new zero carbon schools. Yet the schools we have will always be more sustainable than anything we can build in the future. And I think now about Cowbridge, where we're going to perhaps make an existing building redundant, perhaps as we have in the past, demolish it, forgetting about all the embodied carbon in that building, because we can build some bright new fancy one, ignoring the carbon in a new construction. Because that doesn't matter, does it? Because it's carbon neutral in use, but you have to pay back the carbon for building it, but that's not been thought through. So again, it's buzzwords, it's greenwash. We need to use the buildings and reuse the buildings we have, and we need to be building new schools, not just for zero carbon use, but for deconstruction should they not be needed, or should we need to move them around a little bit in the future. That's how you future-proof things. You build for deconstruction. There needs to be greater involvement of town and community councils. Very often that they are consulted as an afterthought. Sometimes they're not consulted at all. There's a lot of talk about solar PV on buildings, but no solar thermal, and we have swimming pools in the Vale of Glamorgan, so why aren't we heating the swimming pools using solar thermal? In new council properties, we talk about modern methods of construction, but no mention of embodied energy, no mention of the materials that we choose to use them with, to build them with. How are we going to reduce quarrying that's needed for new materials? And that includes the quarrying for batteries that we now want to install everywhere. We need to think about where these materials are coming from and the environmental impact of the big holes in other parts of the world. So there's a lot of good things there in the report, but it needs to go further, and we need to act and not just have words. And I'll leave you there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Perry, for your contribution. And as we know, that this is a working document, so we're working towards being net zero. So, I would take that on board as well. So if I can ask Councillor Bronwyn Brooks if she'd like to come in now, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was in around the public transport, actually. I just wanted to sort of give a bit of an update there. Obviously, it is a bit of a hot potato at the moment, and there's a lot of work going on. But it's about that reassurance that we wholeheartedly recognise that travel has changed, and people's expectations and what they're using our public transport for. So there is a lot of work. There's a lot of conversations going on actually to understand the use and about how best we can develop those, particularly the bus services and linking up with trains in our communities, particularly then in our rural communities, which are often lifelines as well. I sit on the Regional Transport Authority, so there are a lot of conversations going on between local authorities as well to try and get some joined up thinking, really, with the bus operators, and how we can develop and deliver those services for the best of everybody. And it's about talking to various groups as well. So, like, for instance, I went to the 50 Plus Forum last week, and I know Kyle Phillips came along with me as well, and to talk about their views and about what public transport, what they're actually looking for, what their needs are in the communities. And some really interesting conversations came up there. We're talking about elderly, disabled, but actually about ethnic minority communities as well. So there was some really interesting and some, excellent conversations going on there. So that conversation is ongoing. There's still work to do around all of this. And obviously, at the moment, the BES funding, which is the supported services, is extended until the end of next March. And there's a huge amount of work with the Regional Transport Authority and officers and Welsh Government around that. So, we definitely recognise, I suppose, is the quick answer, that things have changed, people's expectations, but it's about how we can help support our communities with public transport. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks, and thank you everyone for your contributions over this topic, and especially thank you to Susanna for the presentation. That was really useful. I mean, one of the things that I would say on page 28 for the councillors in Barry to let residents know, I'm sure you read it on there, the consultation on locations for e-bike hire stations in Barry, and that sort of went live on the 5th of June. So I think it's really important, if we're talking about net zero and things like that, that we sort of get involved in these consultations that are available to us. And I appreciated in the document the various different points that you could go to get further information. I like the way that it was presented, and that you had the sort of like the risks and things like that as well, Susanna. I thought that was really helpful. I look forward to having the RAG rating when that's available in the next 6 months, to report back to this committee. So, I mean, there was a couple of things there that people have talked about. Gareth, I don't know if there's any suggestions that have come up that we need to put forward, or
It depends, Chair. If Tom has noted them and he's happy to progress them as part of his work outside the committee.
Yes.
I've been busy making notes of all councillors' comments, and we'll provide a composite response now in the next week, so that Gareth can circulate that ahead of your next meeting. And for the areas that have been a sort of constant or consistent theme, we'll make sure that we put some particular prominence on those when we bring the update in 6 months' time as well.
That'll be fantastic. I did see a note from Councillor Eddie Williams to ask whether he could have an update as well, if that's possible. So
Certainly.
what you send to us, if you could send it to him as well, if that's okay.
All
right. So we have got recommendations, as you would expect. So are we happy to move these recommendations that we have in front of us?
Move the recommendations, Chair.
Thank you. Have I got a seconder for that?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Drake. Okay, that's those moves. So thank you very much for that discussion. I think that was really useful to hear everyone's views on that. So thank you. So if we can now move to agenda item 7. This one should be slightly shorter than the others, but you never know. Okay, so agenda item 7, and Gareth is going to lead on this for us. Thank you, Gareth.
Yeah, Chair, very briefly. Members of the committee may recall previously Councillor Julie Leavitt was the appointed named deputy, so that occurred back in last December. Since then, Councillor Leavitt's obviously come off this committee chair, so there is a position opening up on the City Deal Joint Scrutiny Committee chair. So we're just looking to for nominations for this evening, Chair, and they'll be ratified by full council at the end of July. Thank you.
Councillor William.
Thank you, Chair. Well, in line with that protocol, I would nominate our current deputy, Councillor Ian Perry, for the post.
Thank you. Councillor Anthony Ernest.
Yes, I was going to nominate Councillor Charles Champion in exactly the same way as I did previously, Chairman. He's a good councillor that is well respected and would do a very good job as the Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Do I have any other? Oh, I need seconders for both of those.
I will
I'll second.
second it, Councillor Williams' suggestion.
I'll second Anthony Ernest's suggestion.
Right. Was that Councillor Driscoll for Anthony
That's it.
Ernest and
That's
Councillor Drake for Councillor Willam? Yeah.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Gareth, should we take that to the vote then?
Yep, Chair, I'll just do a quick roll call. So it's just asking members for their preference of either Councillor Perry or Councillor Champion. If I can start with Councillor Drake, can I have your preference, please?
Councillor Perry.
Okay, and Councillor Driscoll, can I have your preference, please?
Councillor Champion.
Councillor Ernest, can I have your preference, please?
Councillor Champion.
Councillor Hooper, can I have your preference, please?
Councillor Perry.
Councillor Lloyd Selby, can I have your preference, please?
Councillor Perry.
Councillor Perks, can I have your preference, please?
Councillor Perry.
Councillor Perry, can I have your preference, please?
Hi, Councillor Perry.
And finally, Councillor Williams, can I have your preference, please?
Yeah, Councillor Perry.
Okay, Chair, I have 6 for Councillor Perry and 2 for Councillor Champion. So Councillor Perry is named deputy.
Fantastic. That's great. And thank you, Councillor Ernest, for putting Councillor Champion forward as well. Okay, so I believe that that's the last of the agenda items for this evening. Yes, I don't have anything else on the agenda. I don't have anything urgent under part 1 or under part 2 from the chair. And the next meeting, I'm just having a look at my agenda. I can't actually see when the next meeting is. It's July. It will be the next meeting. So
it's the 18th of July, Chair. 18th of July.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for all your participation this evening. I think it's been a very interesting meeting. So thank you very much and good night to everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Perks, for chairing the meeting